Hemshech Hayim Beis, Volume 1, Chapter 171. On the top of page 346. So, in this last chapter, 170, we established, basically concluding the topic of Kutsha Brichos Tako Baraisa, that God looks into the Torah, creates the world, and that's the interface. Adam Kadmon, that the Torah is Moshel HaKadmoni, so it's a moshel as he puts a lavush for Eir Ein Sof. And then he explains it specifically. Eir Ein Sof is the revelation that's in Torah. But the way it reveals itself is not just in an all-encompassing picture, it's in detail. Like he says, Torah is given klal and prat. Those are the words. And explains it, we see that in several ways. First of all, there are parshas in the Torah, Vaydaber Hashem al Moshe, Daber al Bnei Yisrael Lemer, and he explains in detail those words to show the Hamshacha. Vaydaber is Hamshacha, Hashem is Chochmah, El Moshe is Yesod Abba, Daber al Bnei Yisrael is Netzach and Heid, Lemer is Malchus, in order to transmit it into Biyah, to the worlds of the lower worlds. And therefore, the particular parsha, each parsha conveys a particular mitzvah or episode or narrative in the Torah, and that's the Gilui Eir Ein Sof. It's Tako Baraisa, the Kutsha Brichu, Eir Ein Sof is been revealed through that particular element. And this gives us the power for binyan v'tikna elam, is that we can build and repair the worlds based on what the Torah tells us. So we can go to each particular aspect of the world that the Torah is directing us how to elevate. So we have a blueprint by which we follow as we do our specific work. So there you have Ak is the blueprint, the klal, the Torah. But the Torah speaks now in front of Prat. Is mislabish, as he says, in the 10 spheres of Atzilus. So everything we learned earlier about how the structure of existence is, that God has Eira Bli Gvul, and Eira Gvul plays itself out in Torah. That you have the Ak, the blueprint, that's the Eir Klali. He doesn't mention here specifically, but he alludes to that you also have Pnimius Ak, because Torah obviously is rooted all the way in the Eira Bli Gvul too. But he doesn't specifically spell it out here yet. Because remember, the Torah of the Matan Torah, the Chiddush was that it added the Anuch Eir Chodesh that the others didn't add. This he didn't yet connect and tie together directly, just to keep the whole context. But we do have Torah as being an interface between the klal and the prat. That's what he's addressing now. And hopefully he'll spell out later how it also brings us back to the Eir Bli Gvul, just like Pnimius Ak Atik connects us to into Eir Ein Sof itself. But regardless, right now, klal to prat, in each particular mitzvah, we have a way to repair the world. He says that Imi Kaim Yisrael, the Torah is the condition upon which the world is built, was created in order for it to be repaired by us. That's Dibur Chachamim Baheva.
Torah comes from Chitzenis Atik, right? No, Chitzenis Ak.
So it comes from Achochmed Ak. That's how he spells it out.
That's in Chitzenis Ak.
Hold on. Then when he goes and starts talking about Ak, he says that Ak is the klal. That klal is the Chitzenis Ak. Pnimius Ak, however, is higher than even the klal.
Right. So it's in Chitzenis Ak.
No, he doesn't say that specifically. He's right now he's talking about that aspect of Torah, klal, and prat. You have to say Torah is connected to all the levels of Ak, not just Chitzenis. The klal aspect. When you speak klal and prat, you're speaking Arich, Chitzenis Ak.
It's not only Torah. Everything that comes from Ak has klal and prat in it, because that's where it comes from, and Ak has klal and prat. So everything in the world, everything that comes from Ak has klal and prat. I'm just trying to say what's the chiddush in the Torah Dafka.
First of all, what does that mean? What you just said?
If he comes from there, and it's that the whole thing made up of klal and prat, so everything that comes from it is also made up of klal and prat.
So you ask me, what does it mean that Torah comes from Chochmah Ak?
No, I'm asking why.
If there's no Torah, you don't have a blueprint that you can read. Torah is the manifestation of that blueprint, of that klal.
Right.
Without it, it's just there without accessing it. So when it says the Eibishter looks in the Torah and he creates the world, Ak is created by God, but then the Torah documents what he put in that klal.
Torah is a mirror image of Ak, and Ak is klal prat, so Torah is klal prat.
I'll spell it out this way. God, when he wanted to create the world, he created a air klali called Ak. That is documented in Torah. So Torah is that blueprint. If you take away Torah, yes, you have Ak as air klali, but you don't have it's not communicated. We have nothing to read. Before Matan Torah, Ak was also there, but they weren't able to access it.
So Torah is like the first gili of Ak. Afterwards comes everything else.
Or is the gili of Ak, not the first, the gili of Ak.
The gili of Ak. It didn't precede Ak in a sense.
Right here he's speaking how Torah is rooted in Chochmah Ak. Torah is as an entity, is a body. We're not talking about the roots before the Tzimtzum.
Chachma is the first gili, so the Torah is the first.
But I wouldn't call the first. It is the gili. There is no other gili.
Everything that comes after that is also.
That's the building of it.
Yeah.
But what it says God looked in the Torah and with that he built. That's the blueprint. There's nowhere else he looked. There's no other place to look.
I see.
Remember, Ak is not a planet. It's a dimension. It's a dimension that encompasses everything that's going to come. Where is that manifest? That's the Torah. You can basically say Torah and Ak are I wouldn't say it's the same thing, but that's how he defines it. Torah is the level of Chachma of Ak.
Ak is like the Moed and Torah is like the Torah?
No way, no. I'm not clear what you're trying. Ak is a dimension, and Torah is the communication of that dimension.
I'm just trying to say that Ak includes everything for the next 6,000 years.
And so does Torah.
Right, but Ak is the klal, and Torah is also.
Not also. Torah is the level of Ak. Torah is Chachma of Ak. That's what Torah is.
And that's Pneumius and Torah?
Depends which aspect. If you speak in the klal aspect, as it becomes closer to existence, it relates to existence, then there's like you spoke, it's a klal and a prat. If you speak a deeper, like let's say Pneumius, of Ak and Pneumius Torah, you'd be talking how it's more reflective of the Ein Sof aspect.
So you're saying, what do we mean when we say Ak? We mean Torah.
I wouldn't quite put it that way. Atzilus is Elokus, but how is it communicated? It's through Torah. That's how I would explain it. When you talk about Ak and the world, you're talking about the dimensions, like basically the building blocks. Ak is a building block. Torah is the way that we understand that building block, or we can read it. That's how I would put it. If there was no Torah, let's put it this way, God forbid, there would be an Ak, but we wouldn't be able to access it. It would be like if you see a world. Here's a world. That's exactly what he's saying. And someone said to you, how does this world work? Where's the blueprint? You don't have no blueprint to turn to. That's how I would explain it. So there's a blueprint in heaven, so to speak, and Ak knows. But we would have nothing to know. When God gave us the Torah, He gave us the blueprint. He gave us basically the image of Ak, as it manifests in a blueprint that we can read. That's how I would explain it.
Without the Torah, was able to access only until Atzilus and not Torah, not Ak.
First of all, they were not given the Torah officially.
Right, they're not giving.
So therefore, when it says actually not Torah, they were Mekayim. They had glimpses of it.
Right. So
but Ruchnius, they were great shamas. So they had. Remember, God used the blueprint when He created existence, so it's there. The Torah was not created by Matan Torah. The Torah was given by Matan Torah. So when God created the world, the way He did it was in a structured way, in order for it to make sense, and for us to be able to connect to it. So He didn't just say, "Pop, here's a world," which He could have done. He could have just, draw a piece of art called the universe. He did it in an organized way. He first put it into a document called Torah. There's no document there. We're talking here conceptually. That God basically put it in the Torah. So when He created the world, He didn't just say "pop." What He said was "Vayemer Elokim Hiyeh." He consulted His own blueprint. Now, of course, he created the blueprint, so he has to consult it. Yes, he has to consult it because he wants to apply himself to us. He wants to give us a blueprint. So if he doesn't put it into a blueprint, then it would be a detached. It would be like God created a world and we have no way of understanding it. You wouldn't have an operator's manual. Think of an engineer building an unbelievable machine. You have the machine, it's working, but there's no manual with it. There's no schematics.
That's in every level. Matzilus, B'riyah, in all the levels.
No, but only Ak has the whole picture. Remember, only Ak is the air Kloli. The whole operator's manual is only Ak. Everything else is just a specific level, part of the process. So imagine, the engineer has an operator's manual, and he put everything in there, and then he consults it. By Yemer Elokim, he reads the Torah. Does God have to read? Of course he doesn't have to read. He could have done it without, but then you don't have a relationship. Then you have an engineer that's completely in one domain, and we're just creatures groping around. So the Torah becomes this interface. Okay, so the Torah is the documentation of what Ak is seeing. It tells you this is here, this is here. It gives you the whole picture. Someone who knows how to read the Torah can see the whole 6,000 years, can see all time and space. But here's the key. Then comes the next step. So God says, so it says, Kudshe Brich is Takabarais. That's what he says. Kudshe Brich is Eire Ein Sof. Looks into Araisa, into Ak, into his own picture now, his blueprint. And with that he says, here, okay, now we have a prat, came out of the klal. The seed has now yielded. Without Ak, you have no seed. This is the seed, the blueprint, okay? Now comes another thing. God gives us the Torah.
So it says, Sefer Mabit Kol Aderes B'skir Achas, he's looking into Torah? That's what it means?
He's looking into Ak.
But Ak is Torah, he said.
How do I keep explaining to you? I don't understand what you're talking about. An operator's manual is what?
Right. So
an operator's manual is a documented picture of the whole specifics.
Right.
But so one second. The one who wrote this operator's manual, if you read the operator's manual, you'll get that whole picture.
Right.
That is Ak. Torah is the documentation of that picture. That's exactly what it is. The documentation of the picture of Ak. Ak is the picture, Torah is the documentation of it.
And Ak extends to the highest possible levels.
After the Tzimtzum. The structure in existence.
After the Tzimtzum.
It's only after the Tzimtzum.
So Torah covers before the Tzimtzum.
Okay, it's a good question. He doesn't address it yet. You'd have to say, because Ak ultimately has also previous Ak, because ultimately Ak is not... but for all practical purposes, Ak is the klal to the prat beneath it, not before it. It's only because it's rooted there that it can also reveal. There's a whole thing called Pnimius Ak and Pnimius Atik and Pnimius Torah. We didn't address that yet. I've been speaking all the time that there's two tracks here. Remember, he said two things in the Mamutza. There's Ak as Pnimius Ak and Chitzenius Ak. And that connects us to the Eire Ein Sof that's beyond. But right now he's focusing a lot more on how Ak works its way downward. Because that's the only way. You can't get to the second step of Pnimius Ak if you don't get to Chitzenius Ak. Remember, I've said that a million times. So you can't jump there without first going through the details. So Ak is Torah is the documentation of Ak. That's what I would say. It's Ak put into a book. You could not put it in a book. And if you don't put it in a book, it's Ak alone. In the book, it's Torah.
You said that Torah is the documentation of the picture. So now you separate. You're saying that there's something else other than the blueprint. The blueprint, and then
there's the picture, and there's the blueprint of the picture, the documentation of it. I don't know what the problem is.
It's hard to imagine.
Huh?
It's hard to imagine.
Why? Just imagine if you weren't given the Torah, what would be? There's something there.
Well, that's not the question. The difficulty you imagine is we're speaking about separate entities, and it's really not separate entities. So
I don't know what you're talking. Now, you guys are talking about two different things. So let's not confuse.
Okay.
He's speaking about one thing, you're asking another thing.
Okay,
so it's hard to address two things at once.
So don't forget mine.
I don't know what yours is yet.
Mine is that we seem to be addressing Torah right now is separate from Ak. Ak and Torah seem to be you can't change them. You can't separate them.
Can you understand that God has the power to create something, right? He could have done it hypothetically without a Torah.
That's certainly true.
So it's an energy, divine energy to create, but he chose to do it through a Torah.
Okay.
So that's the difference in Torah and Ak. Ak is the doing it through the energy that encompasses it all. Torah documents it, communicates it. If for you it helps that Ak is Torah, do you want to say it's the same thing? It's not the same thing, but you could say it's the same. You want to say Ak is a mechanism, is a world. Torah is not a world. Torah is God's wisdom. Ak is a mechanism. It's a state of being.
What is the process?
It's like, would you say, like you say, neshama comes from Atzilus. Why don't you say the neshama is Atzilus? Why do you say it comes from Atzilus? Because Atzilus is a stage. Ak is a stage. Neshama is an entity that comes from that stage, from that state of consciousness, if you wish.
It says Zeis Teres Adam, that means Adam the Kadmon. Adam Kadmon. The Torah is Adam Kadmon.
Fine, look, I'm saying if you understand it as one, it's fine. Keep it like that. It doesn't change the picture so much. Technically, it's not. Then Ak is called Ak and Torah is called Torah.
Hashem and the Torah one.
No, because I'm just having the.
I just asked you a question about Neshama and Atzilus.
Yeah.
Why do you call the Neshama of Atzilus? Say the Neshama is Atzilus. Same question you're asking.
It's
No,
not the
it's still
same
different.
because Shama is only a small.
So is the Torah only a specific thing. The Torah is a Torah. Ak is a world. Ak is a dimension. Ak is a state of being.
The Torah is greater than.
It could be greater, but it's also, but Ak, yeah, and you know something? The Torah travels from Ak downward, and Ak doesn't travel downward.
But I said Bara Alma including Ak, because Ak is a world. Bara Alma.
Here, go back to the Lashon. He says that Torah is Chochma of Ak.
Right.
No, it says Bara Alma means Olam Hazal Gashmi, or it means all the elements,
Everything,
including Ak.
No. Ak is the where he looks into. Look, the Lashon. Why don't you look at the exact language?
Okay. So we say that anything below Ak is Bar Alma.
Yeah, you have to say. You could say that there's a level of Stakel Baraisa, the Torah before the Tzimtzum, so to speak, and it creates everything. Yeah, you could say that. But he doesn't say that. But that he doesn't speak about here.
Okay.
Here, first he began by saying, remember that Torah is Atzilus, Chochma of Atzilus. Remember that?
Yeah.
Why don't you go look inside and ask me? And let's start with how it is a Chochma Atzilus. Why don't you ask the question? Why is it Chochma of Atzilus? Say it's Atzilus. Where's that chapter where he says? Right, Kuf Samach Beis. He says Kuf Samach Beis. He begins like this. When you do it, that's how he says it. It's also mamutza. The Bria Zalzam is why they had Torah. Right? So there he goes on. That's where he starts to Stakel Baraisa. It says, Kashem she'esas rizim magbilim se'er, k'mekein ha'teira magbil se'er. So you can ask the question, is Torah the same thing as Esas Sfiras? It apparently is not the same thing. Then he says, then Torah b'chachma nafka, sha'chachma hi b'chinas pnimi. You have to say, look, the Torah is definitely rooted higher than everything. Because you say, it says, Araisa v'Yisrael kutshabrichu kul echad. You say Torah is the wisdom and will of God. Then there's a process of how the worlds are created. And then there's Torah, how it plays itself out there. So,
It doesn't tell you that Chachma is also the Eshes HaChayis for the rest of the body.
right, and he says here exactly the same thing. He says just like this is Sfiras. So the way you'd have to explain it is the following. That's what I'm trying to explain. The worlds and Torah are not the same thing. But Torah manifests in these worlds. Torah, for example, has wisdom. Right? Torah is a wise book. So wisdom right away means it's connecting to spheres. So let me maybe reverse it and say the other way around. Torah connects us straight to the God's mind and will. Okay? That goes all the way up to the source. He doesn't discuss that here. We'll discuss it later. There's plenty coming still about the explanation of Torah. The whole thing is going to begin now. So Torah is rooted all the way up there. Like Neshamas are rooted all the way up there. But then begins a process. Hashem wants a world. World is not Torah. Ak is not Torah. Neither is Akudim, Nekudim, Vrudim. Nothing. That's not Torah. It's the world that God wants. How does He build these worlds? He does it in a way of Kal Prat. So far, so good. Then He takes this Torah that is rooted and expresses the innermost wisdom, the highest levels that are even higher than wisdom, and says, I want this Torah to travel through this structure, so it should serve as a mamutza, as a blueprint for us to connect to it all. If you take out the Torah from the picture, you'd have an organized system, but you would have no documentation of it. We wouldn't be able to relate to it. We would have no way to understand it. So Torah becomes the body that essentially it goes through Ak and all these levels, and it manifests in Chochmah. Torah has Chochmah in it. We just learned Torah has all the Esses Sfiras in it. Vaydaber Hashem al Moshe Leimer, Daber el Bnei Yisrael Leimer. Vaydaber Hashem al Moshe, Daber el Bnei Yisrael Leimer. So the Torah now has assumed the properties of exactly Zesh Torah Adam. The Adam God created, He now puts the Torah, travels through these levels, and it's rooted. First, He says it's Chochmah of Atzilus. Then He goes deeper in the next chapter, right? He says in chapters, 2 chapters. He says, "B'chinas Chochmah Torah, b'chinas Chochmah shel Ma'alam Atzilus." The Chochmah Torah is really a wisdom that's higher than Atzilus. What's the wisdom of Torah? It's the wisdom of Ak, the Klal. But Torah is really beyond it all. It's just manifesting. So you could have had a scenario where God created the worlds, and Torah, it doesn't have Chochmah in it. Then Torah would not connect to the Shtalshlus. It wouldn't connect to. Remember, we talked about Torah Atzilus, Torah Abri. He spoke about levels in Torah. Torah actually travels through these levels, and it becomes essentially the conveyor, the communicator of what these levels are about to us. That's how I would explain it. That's what he said. It's Megala Eid Ein Sof. Last chapter. What did we say?
That's all. That's very.
Eid Ein Sof. Gili Eid Ein Sof in details.
It's very understood.
Okay.
Now it comes back to the question of Istakl Be'eraisa, but the way you explain it has nothing.
So when he put Torah there for these levels, and the way God wanted it, He made it like a Kutchabrichu goes on Eid Ein Sof. Okay. Istakl Be'eraisa. He looks into the Torah of what's called Chochmah of Ak. Okay. Torah now that as it's manifest in Chochmah of Ak, and there you have Hi'er, V'yemer Elokim Hi'er. So now the building begins. So take away Ak and all the worlds, you have a Torah L'fnei Tzimtzum, inaccessible. Okay? Now He builds the worlds in a very organized way. He puts a Torah that travels through these worlds. The Torah assumes the properties of these worlds. In other words, assumes Chochmah, Bina, and so on. Chochmah. Now we have a blueprint, and now with a blueprint you can build, like you said, Talmidei Chacham, Benoim, they build the world, they repair the world. You have something to follow, because the Eibishter put it all into this blueprint, into an operator's manual that we can look at. Take away the operator's manual, you still have the worlds, you still have an existence. Now, in truth, you wouldn't have existence because God did it through the Torah. If you didn't, but that's a choice that He made. Hypothetically, you could have had worlds without a Torah, but He chose not to do it that way. Obviously,
that's the missing link right over there. What you just said.
That's okay. Fine. Yeah, but you can't say the world is Torah. That's the key. Torah is not the world, and world is not Torah. Which is the creation of worlds, and then the Torah is like a blueprint that's on the you can say is on terms of the world, communicates using the terms of the world. That's why Torah Dibra B'Lashon B'nei Adam. That's the Lashon. What's the Lashon? Dibra Chachamim B'Heva. The Dibra of Torah is the Yesavos. The bottom line is, without Torah, if someone doesn't follow Torah in this world, they have no way to connect to the blueprint. They can guess and try different attempts, trial and error. You don't have a blueprint to refer to, and you don't have a blueprint how to elevate the whole thing. It's like having a machine that's working, and then when it doesn't work, you have nowhere to go to fix it. You don't know how it works. That's essentially what it comes down to. That doesn't mean there's no Chochmah of Ak, but you have no access to it.
What you just said is totally understood. It's just you mentioned that the world without Torah there would be the world. It's just we would have no way to access it. On the other hand, you're saying that the worlds were created through the Torah.
Because that's He chose to do, because He wants us to access it. Exactly.
Right. So, like, well, how what was first? Was it the Torah, and then the world were created through the Torah?
First is God. Always first, God wants something. He wants worlds. He wants a Dira B'Tachtenim, but He wants to give us tools to make a Dira B'Tachtenim. And Torah and mitzvahs are those tools. That's how I would put it. Nesava Kodesh Baruch Hu liyas leidir b'tachtenim. He desired to have a home in this lowest of worlds. He wants a Mishkan. But how do you build a Mishkan? So he gives Moshe and Bitzalel instructions how to build it. So the worlds is the Mishkan. Or the worlds is the entity that you turn into a Mishkan. And the Torah Mitzvahs tells you how to do it. And carries it as well. It doesn't just tell you how to do it. The instructions, the actual message, just like what it says, and sometimes in Chassidus it says, even the Yesh of Tachtenim is also carried here through Eir. Eir reveals to us. Like, how do you know that God wants to do it b'tachtenim? That also Torah tells us. That's correct. So Torah is not just a tool to build it, Torah is also the channel through which God creates it. No, you could have said the blueprint only one way. You could say it's not a blueprint. You could say he built a machine and gave us instructions how to fix the machine or elevate the machine. He went a step further. He actually created the machine with the operator's manual. Let's put it that way. That makes the connection even deeper.
Today's Tanya about the ISIS.
No, it could have been one. Yeah, it could have been one way. He could have said, "Here's a world, and now here are the instructions what to do." But he may not. But he didn't have to follow those instructions. The fact that Hashem also looked in the Torah and created, it's like Magid Dvar Yankov with mitzvahs. You could say He gave us mitzvahs. Who says He's doing these mitzvahs? The fact that He does the mitzvahs makes our relationship back to the interface far deeper. When you do a mitzvah, you're basically connecting to God doing the mitzvah. So there's a real meeting point. There's a real meeting point. So the fact that He put, so yes, secure. That hopefully that adds something as well. Okay.
Now you're getting there.
Fine.
Just kidding.
I don't know if I'm getting there or you're getting there, but that's another story.
No, you're getting to
We're getting there.
You're getting to
I don't have a problem if it needs more explanation. That's what we're doing. He doesn't spell it out, but it's apparently this is exactly the Torah comes from Chachma of Atzilus, Chachma of Ak. In a way, you could say Torah is what's the word I want? Transporting the vision of Ak through Holish Talshlus, all the way to the details. So you could say that as well. Ram Shechin says, "Can you do the tachlis hakavana of b'ris?" That's where you have to read the words very precisely. He's saying it right here at the end. Here he says here. This is the end of this half a chapter we just read yesterday. He says, "Inin amavur ba'pasha zewa edein sof hanimshachu mizgala." So what's in the pasha? That's edein sof. The edein sof within existence is nimshach and izgala through vayidaber Hashem in the mitzvah pratis or the sipur dvarim of the Torah. And then he continues, the you see, he says both things. The beginning, the creation of the worlds was through Torah, and afterwards you draw down additional energies. And then he says, and it's known that the ultimate purpose is what? Is to bring Ein Sof. And that is through Torah. There's no other way to do it. That's the key. Because Torah becomes essentially the mechanism, both from the Eibishter how He creates and how we, Kach Barnash Kayim Alma, Yasik B'Torah V'Kayim Alma. So it becomes the way. So yes, this blueprint is a two-way thing. It's God using the blueprint. It's we use the blueprint, and so on. The world Ak is the actual level. That is the klal.
Torah is transporting the vision of Ak or to us, or through the worlds, or it is the vision. It's transporting, right?
Both. The answer is both. Torah is not a sideshow. You have to ask the other way around. What is Ak? The answer is Ak sees, for example, a stone. Right? It's the vision, that level that sees the stone. The Torah is conveying and includes that vision. But the Torah precedes Ak at the end of the day. There's no Ak before the Tzimtzum, and there is a Torah before the Tzimtzum. The Torah is God's wisdom, and Torah goes all the way to the source.
It talks about God.
It would be if he added the point that the Staka Baraisa can be even said on a higher level, that God looked into the Torah and created Ak. That would probably be helpful here. But Pashas it is also that way. But there you can't say he's looking anywhere because there's no levels there. See, Ak is where the levels begin. So the whole idea of a blueprint and so on is only really in the world of Ak. That's where that dimension begins. Closer or farther?
Closer.
Yeah, but the Torah has notes that there are no levels there. So.
And then he continues, said the Torah comes down into Zmanim. He speaks about specific times when the parshas were said, and speaks about the different parts of history. Parsha Noach, he brings Mabul, Parsha Lech Lecha, then later Korach, Polak. Bottom line is the Torah Chazer Shagad B'chinas Avos Shosha B'chinas Machshava Gedumish B'chinas Ak B'chinas Er Klali. Maybe what's also confusing is sometimes it appears that Ak precedes Torah, and sometimes it appears that Torah precedes Ak. Because here it seems to be first there's an Ak, then there's a Torah that's rooted there, and communicates what that vision is, and brings it into the details, so to speak.
Right.
But you have to say that Torah ultimately precedes everything, because it wasn't born an Ak. You can only say it was born there as far as a blueprint. As a blueprint, when you say God's looking into a blueprint, that you can say is already Ak. Because remember, you have to say, as we spoke, that God is beyond time and space. Ak is not beyond time and space. Ak has an element of time in it. There's the picture. It has one snapshot. So as soon as you're speaking that way, in other words, God is looking at Torah as a blueprint, you're already talking Torah as a certain image is going on. If you talk about Torah beyond that, there's no image. There's nothing to image. There's no image to discuss.
Of Ak is bound by time.
We're back to Pnimius. We're talking Chutzenis. He doesn't talk about Pnimius. Pnimius Ak is beyond time and space, and that's that. But you can't go there without first getting Chutzenis. Do you understand that?
When he's looking at the Torah, when he's looking at the Torah to create the world, it's already applying himself. It's already a snapshot.
Exactly,
So
correct.
That's the level of Ak.
So that's why where Torah is rooted in that level, Chachma Vak. That's what it says here. So the Lashon it says here is that what's the Lashon here? Avasharsha b'chinas machshava geduma, b'chinas Ak. Torah comes into Zman and the details, but its root is in machshava that's Ak b'chinas Er Kloli, and they're all the parshas are together.
Yeah. It comes to Zman details later. We can do Nasa v'Yarda.
Yeah, exactly. And then there, everything is in one big picture, right? And then yep. So we're definitely talking about the process of Torah as an entity that you can relate to. You can see from that it brings the Gemara that Moshe got chsuma nitna. He was given a maimer sasim. He was given a type of concealed entire picture on Mountain Torah. He got it. He received that picture. And then Megillah nitna, that it was given specific, is how it comes out in each level, in each parsha, as it actually becomes revealed. You have to say at the end of the day that if you can't imagine, because it didn't happen this way, but hypothetically, God create a world without a Torah. You really can't say that, because He did create, because as soon as He creates a world, Torah is His revelation. So Torah is the revelation of God in creating a world. But hypothetically, He could have done in a way which He never gave us that blueprint. So then what we'd have? We'd have a stone. We'd have Tzemeach, Chaim Medaber. We'd have a whole world like we have. Which means it's rooted in Ak. Which means there is a blueprint somewhere. But that blueprint remains inaccessible. So for all practical purposes, you have a structure of worlds. The question whether Ak equals Torah and Torah equals Ak, my instinct tells me no, because Ak is a world and Torah is not a world. But that they become bonded as one, with Torah is expressing that vision and Torah has that vision, absolutely. But Torah has to be seen as, because Ak is a world at the end of the day.
But here it says in the first line of the Kitzah, I think he sheds light on it.
What does he say? Kushbicha atzma sein sof atik da Ak, istalka baraisa, chachma da Ak, chachma da Torah.
See how he says it right away?
Yeah, but he says this all the time. He keeps saying chachma da Ak is chachma da Torah.
But then he said, Mashlak ad mensh et zamanim shom luvish b'zay. I know he was saying it.
Yeah. In Achanami.
So he's basically saying that.
Yeah, but the bottom line is, can you say Ak means equals Torah? It never says such a thing. It's difficult to make a statement like that. Remember, first he spoke about Atzilus as a mamutza, and then spoke Chochma Atzilus that's where Torah comes from. Well, let's put it this way: Chochma of Ak, you can say, is also the root of all wisdom in existence, even wisdom of science, let's say, or wisdom of basic common sense that we have. However, that too is rooted in Torah. So that's why you have to say that the wisdom of Ak also governs wisdom in general, even when a person is not learning Torah. But then we go a step further and said that itself is also communicated through Torah. Maybe that's another additional point that needs to be taken into consideration, because Ak is the klal of existence. Let's put it this way: if you didn't have an Ak, you only had a Torah, you may not have a world. You'd only have a Torah-dika world, so to speak. Ak, at the end of the day, is a world, is an entity. Maybe that's another additional point. In other words, Ak is subject to the tzimtzum in a very specific way. The Ak can only emerge through a tzimtzum. Torah exists. The tzimtzum is not what created Torah. Ak doesn't exist before the tzimtzum, which means Ak is entity. It's very distant from our world, but it's a world. That's why I'm resisting to say that Ak equals Torah, because Ak is everything that a world is. Torah is not equal to the world. Let's say this world. This world was created through Torah, every aspect of it. But you wouldn't say the world equals Torah. You say Torah is the blueprint to which God created the world.
Apples and oranges.
Maybe what you're asking is, in other terms, is what's the difference between the blueprint of Ak and the blueprint of Torah? Since I keep using the word blueprint. The truth is, I use the word blueprint. He never used the word blueprint here as an Ak. And Torah, it's more Skir Achas. Skir Achas could be more the vision of existence. It's lav dafka the blueprint. I use blueprint as an example because at the end of the day it is blueprint, and Torah is for sure blueprint. But at the end of the day, Ak is really the vision of everything. So just like this table is not Torah, even though the Torah created it, Ak is not Torah, even though Torah created it, and Torah is carrying that vision into existence.
It created and it's a manifestation of it. It's like...
Yeah, but remember, Ak is a world, so it's like a world like our world. In that sense, the world and Torah are not the same, basically. Ak is the vision of existence. The Torah is the vision of existence plus more. That's why it's problematic to say that. Okay.
Right, so it's
I understand that.
you elaborate on
I
that. What's the
understand Torah is a vision
the
of
blueprint of the Ak and the
existence.
blueprint of the Torah?
Isn't
I just told you.
The existence
It's as a stone
itself is
Torah.
Ak. The existence
No,
itself
it's
is
two
Ak.
separate things.
No, why is a stone not Torah? God created it. He looked in the Torah. This says Evan in Torah. There's an Evan in the world. What's the difference between the Evan in the Torah, Evan in the world? What's the difference? This one is purely divine, the divine image of it. And here's an actual Evan, which is Gashmizik, that can deny God's existence. That's the key difference.
Why do you say Ak is a vision?
Well, now we have to align the material world to what the Torah, the blueprint wants of it. Ak is the root of the stone in the deepest place.
But it says in another...
So Ak is a world.
Why do you say it's a vision of existence, Ak?
Because that's what he keeps saying. Skira Achas. It's one snapshot of existence. That's what he says. 1,000 times this is said.
But it says in another place the Torah, when the way it went down all the way, it was meluvish in Tainis Sheker and in the lowest...
But when you say Melubish and Tainis Sheker, did Torah become Sheker? It's Melubish. It's in a world. It goes into a world that's a different world, that's foreign to Torah. It's exactly the point. Torah Semis went into a world and addressing Sheker. Torah could have remained removed from our pettiness, but it goes into our world and struggles with it and tells you here's what to do. But the Torah, God forbid, never becomes the world. The Torah enters a world like this, just like a neshama enters a world to change it. I think that's the key. Let's forget about Ak right now. In this world, you say the world and Torah are one? No. The world was created by God. It's a state of concealment. It's created through Torah. It's created through Eid Ein Sof. Everything about it is Elikus, but it's hidden. Comes a Torah, and a neshama who learns Torah, and a neshama who is Mekayim mitzvahs in this world, and takes the world and aligns it back to what it was meant to be. What is the root of the world? Is Ak. But Torah travels through Ak, and Torah takes that vision as well. That's how I would explain it. Ak to Torah in the world of Ak is the same as a stone to Torah in the world of this world. That's how I would ultimately explain the difference. Except obviously Ak is far more aligned because it's not a stone and Elam Hazeh Gashmi. But as far as a world, it's a picture of the world.
That's how we understood it all the time. You kept on mentioning the blueprint, and that's why.
But it is a skira achas. It is a skira achas. It is one picture of the whole existence. The blueprint I mentioned technically is more Torah is the blueprint. Ak is the image of existence. If you want to be very precise. Now you could say an image and a blueprint are very similar, but it's a little different because for the reasons we spoke.
And the blueprint is already applied.
Also, the image is the picture of it, and the blueprint tells you also what to do with it.
But it's in
the image doesn't necessarily tell you what to do with it.
The difference is it's in the mind. The skira is in the mind. The blueprint is already the way it's applied already in the Torah.
I don't know what you mean by that. The blueprint in Ak is also in the mind. It's a blueprint. What is it? It's not a physical thing.
The snapshot is in the mind.
And what is the Torah in Ak? It's not in the mind.
The Torah is already. It's already. It's ethereal, but it's more of a.
That distinction I don't necessarily agree with. They're both on a spiritual level, so.
Of course.
It doesn't say anywhere Torah is more detailed than it is Ak. Ak is Klal and Prat, and Torah is Klal and Prat. What are you talking about? The Prat of Torah or the Klal?
Even the Klal Torah has the beginnings of it to be.
So does Ak. So does Ak.
Ak always remains one snapshot. The Torah
fine. Okay. Fine. You could say that. The Torah then comes down into details. Right. Good.
So even in the mind, it already has potential.
Fine. That's fine. The Torah will come into details, and Ak is the Klal. That's correct too. The Ak remains a Klal. I mentioned that before. And the Torah will come, take that Klal, and bring it into details.
So one means more than one. One means like united everything in one thing. It means more than just the concept of one, like a single picture. It's like all together, like Yachid or something almost.
Well, we spoke about this at length. Inside, we spoke about Machshava Achas, what Achas means. We spoke about Achas, that's all equal there. We spoke about this level of Echad and Ak right here. Bottom of 341. It says Yechidus is difference of Metzias. It's Achas, not Yachid. That's what he said.
Yes, this one I went away.
Okay. So that's a good point. That's another distinction. That's correct.
Right. Now I can try to understand it more.
But remember, the pratim that come in the world are also coming from the Klal of Ak. They also come from there. The question whether you can say that Klal of Ak is also within the details in Atzilus B'riyat Sida, probably true as well. So it's not that simple. Because it says that Ak, the eagle of Ak, goes all the way to the bottom of a sea. It encompasses it all. But you could technically say in Ak doesn't have a mitzvah pratis like we have, like for example, an Ak that actually comes in the time of the Mabul or the time of Kerach or Bolok and so on, a specific time. Definitely Torah has that element because Torah definitely travels through the whole thing and is given to us down here on earth. But it gives us the snapshot of Ak. Okay, that's fine. But Ak is a world and Torah is Torah. That's the bottom line. The Torah is rooted in the Chachma of Ak.
In Ak it's Bashva. Everything is Bashva. In Torah it comes out in different times.
Aval B'Sharsha, as he says, it's not that way. In its root, all of them are together. Aval B'Sharsha b'chinas machshava. Okay. So we continue. Chapter 171. So now starts a whole new discussion. A new discussion to explain this whole thing of Torah. And perhaps some of these ideas that we've discussed here now are also going to be illuminated as we go along here. To have a fold here, which means chapter 171 begins a new discussion that goes for, I believe, till Kuf Pei Gimel, chapter Kuf Pei Gimel. This is like around 30 pages, 28 pages, the next subplot. So just to get the flow going, remember, we're talking about Er HaGvul. Er HaGvul brings Bittul into the worlds. Er HaGvul aligns the worlds. The others did the aligning. Matan Torah brings in the new dimension. To understand Torah, he began a whole discussion, the Medida of Torah, that the limitations of Torah are not limits. They're Medida Atzmis, Kav Hamida, if you remember, Knei Hamida. And that became the beginning of a whole discussion of the interface, first of Atzilus, then of Torah, then of Ak, and now we're back to Torah, as Torah is this interface between the Klal and the Prat of Ak and the details of existence. And obviously he's going to connect us back to the Eir HaBligvul. So that's what we're up to. That's in a summary, the flow.
One snapshot. That's what we're up to in a snapshot.
So now he says, Lahavim Beis HaMadrega Sheb'Teira, to understand these two levels of the Teira, which means Klal and Prat, he neksiv Zmiris HaYelichu Kecha. By the way, these chapters I already have recorded. This is where I began recording. Back then. So it says, Zmiris HaYelichu Kecha. David HaMelech in Tehillim says, your laws, Chukecha, were songs to me, were like melodies. David Zmiris Karishaluchu.
It's a question.
Right.
Zmiris.
David Karishaluchu, right.
You called it Zmiris?
You called it Zmiris, Shenana Shalzet. And the Gemara concludes that he was punished for this. Because it was like considered a diminishing of Chukecha by calling it melodies. Which always bothered me. I mean, would you imagine everyone sees Torah song? That would be quite nice.
Right, but for his love.
It's music to my ears, you know.
And in Geras HaKedesh, there's a whole siman in David's Zmiris on this pasuk. If you do Inyan, and it's known the Inyan, the David hay mishabeach is a Torah b'mashakol chayes v'kimeon tali b'digdog. What's it? So you know, David was mishabech. He praised the Torah with the fact that all the entire chayes, life, the kiyum and sustenance of the world, tali b'digduk echad, b'digduk Torah, is dependent on one detail, one digduk, one how would you say digduk? Emphasis, digduk.
Minor detail.
But it's more than digduk. Digduk also means emphasis. One point that Torah from Torah's emphasis.
Deriving.
It doesn't say Nekud Achas, it says Digduk Achas. Digduk Achas is 2 points. It means a point, but it means also a precise, an emphasized point. We say Medagdik B'Digduk Chal Shal Divrei Sofrim. So we're not just saying Digduk. We're saying number one, every detail. We're also saying an emphasized detail. Yeah. Shari Tanai Hitna Kodesh Baruch Hu b'Ma'aseh Bereishis, as we learned in the previous chapter, because God made a condition with Ma'aseh Bereishis when He created. Im Yekayim Yisrael Shat Teiraseh, if they will keep the Torah, they will sustain the Torah. He will sustain the worlds. He doesn't say the others. Im Chaz V'Sham Loi, He won't. He just brought that in the previous chapter. So Torah is the condition upon which the world exists. Hari Kol Chayes V'Kiyma Elam Toli B'Kiyma Torah. So the whole sustenance and Kima Elam is Toli and Kima Torah. I'm sensing, by the way, that with this he's also warning a little of what we've been discussing, because he keeps, you see, the Elam. Yeah. There's Elam and there's Torah. Torah, it doesn't say, for example, I don't know if I could say this. Maybe it's too strong to say that Ak is Toli Kima Elam, even though it is, because it's the snapshot of the whole thing. But it's Torah that is really, because you see, Torah. What maybe has to be spelled out. Torah is God's will, what to do with the world, not just God's will of the world. That's a key point. Ak is a snapshot of the world. Like I said, stones, Shemeach. In Ak, you'll see the whole existence. Torah brings the picture of why. What are you supposed to do with this machine? So if you really break it down, it is two aspects. 100%. I keep more I see it. In other words, if you looked at an operator's manual, you could have their snapshot of the machine. You ever see they have their snapshot and they say, here, this piece, that part, that part. That's a snapshot. Torah is more than just a snapshot of existence. Torah also tells you what to do with it. That here, you have a piece of bread, make a bracha on it. Here's the issue of kashrus, Beis Hamikdash. The Torah is far more than just a snapshot of existence from beginning and end of time. Ak is a snapshot. It doesn't say Ak, it tells you the plan. Ak is not God's will necessarily, what to do with it. Teira is God's will, what to do with the world. Now Teira manifests in Chachma of Ak, so it has also the snapshot. Because God says, I look into the Teira and I created the world. So it could have been two tracks. God creates the world with one track, and then He comes in with the Teira and says, here's what you're supposed to do. But no, He wanted it to be bound together. I think this is Maimer Chazal proves that. Because He didn't just say, I created a world, and now I'm going to tell you what to do with it. He's saying the whole world doesn't exist if it doesn't come through Teira. So Teira is number one, the channel through which God creates it, and number two is the channel through which God sustains it. He said before those words as well. He said, what did he say? One second. He said a very important line. I realize now. No, I know that. 1 second. No, the Teira is two things. Through it, the world is created, and through it, the world is sustained and continues to develop.
We're not mamshich that takes us the elements will disintegrate.
Not necessarily. They can just be sustained by the minimal energy of like maintenance.
No, because the Rebbe said in Kaimas Terasi Mutav in Lave Exerciadum Tevaveyo, the world will become nullified.
Well, look, you see the world before the Ovis. That's what the Ovis came to do. They became to realign it.
Well, once the Torah was given, the Rebbe said that if you became the Torah, fine. If not, there's Apachasarlam.
Who said what you just added is your own chiddush? That tonight was made by Ma'aseh Bereshis, not by Matan Torah.
Yeah, of course, by Ma'aseh Bereshis. That once the Torah was given.
Who says that?
So no, the whole reason why it was created it was because.
So 1 second. So what about the generations that didn't keep Torah till Avraham Avinu?
Because it wasn't created yet.
The world wasn't created yet?
No, the Torah wasn't given yet.
I don't know if that's correct. What you're saying. I would say that, okay, there's different ways you could explain it. Fine, I'm not going to go into the details of it. It's not really relevant. My point that I want to make here is that Torah is both the way that God created the world and by the way that it's sustained. Fine, there's the condition. However you explain it, you can explain it many ways.
The whole reason why I created the world was for the Torah. So that you should be Mekan Torah. Once you are not Mekan Torah, then there's no reason for him to have the world.
What's that relevant to our discussion? I'm trying to explain the Maimer here. Yeah, you're just telling me a Maimer Chazal.
No, I'm saying because this is the touch of what it means. But tell me because if you don't make that connection,
you're talking here lines. I'm talking Havana of the chapters here. Let me say what I want to say, and then you'll say what you want to say. Because you're going to understanding a Maimer Chazal. I'm trying to understand the Maimer here. The Maimer is trying to explain that what I was emphasizing right now is that bringing this Maimer Chazal establishes something. As I said, Ak gives you the snapshot of existence. It doesn't necessarily tell you what to do with it. So you could say it's a snapshot. You could say in that sense it's a blueprint of how the world will be created, but not necessarily a blueprint what you to do with it. Torah is instructions. Torah is instructions. It's mitzvahs. It's so on and so forth. What you're supposed to do with it, with the world. The Torah, however, is also given the element of Ak. The Torah is Chacham D'Ak. So the Torah is the reference manual that God is talking about Isa about Alma. He looks into the Torah and with this he creates. I was saying that bringing this Maimer Chazal in the last chapter, and again he brings it here, is even emphasizing that even more because the Torah becomes the key element of how the world is created and how the world is sustained. That's the bottom line. So hypothetically, God could have created the world with one track and then come with another track and say, now I'm giving you a Torah and tell you what to do with this world. You could do that. Made it deeper. The world itself is created with the Torah. In other words, the Torah is carrying the vision and image of Ak into existence, and the same Torah is also telling us what to do with it. That's all I really added.
But I don't think that's the abundant Imam Chazal here. He's bringing down the whole thing that
what you're saying, how does it contradict what I'm saying?
It's not just the operating manual. It's more than that. It's the Torah is going to, the world is not going to be there if the Torah is not kept.
So how is that contradict? I just said that the Torah is the tool with which God creates and with which sustains existence. What do you? What did I say? It's exactly what I said.
Aber the Rebbe can make an under sich.
No, I'm saying it sustains because...
It could have been two tracks. What's the problem here?
I'm explaining the whole hemshech with Ak and how Ak works with the Torah. It's actually answering your questions.
It has both qualities.
Right. And one of them he creates through it, and one is that he sustains through it.
Right.
Through our doing it, it sustains and builds, like you said, builds and sustains the world. So what's the problem? Where's that a contradiction
No,
to
it's
it?
not a contradiction. It sustains because if not, the kavanah of the world.
I just said he brings the Maimer Chazal to establish
Right.
how the Torah is a force that sustains, in addition to creating. That's the point here.
Okay, weiter, Chevra. Wollen wir gehen ein bisschen.
That's the point I wanted to make. That Ak alone, without the Torah, you would not have this kiyum elements, because Ak alone is creation of the world. Gili Eid Ein Sof, he says Al Yidei HaTorah, because the Torah is the key to the sustenance of it. That's exactly the point. Okay. So going back to David HaMelech. Harikol Chai Zukim Me'am Tali B'Kiyum HaTorah. V'gam Shai Dezeh Namshachim Teishu Seis V'Giluyim Be'elemes. Like he said in the previous chapter 2. So existence is dependent on the sustenance on performing Torah. And also through Torah you draw down additional energies and revelations into the world. Okay, clear? Good. Here's an example. Like for example, like Kamoi, similar, like it is that through the offerings in the temple through the offering nasa becomes the elevation of the world. Like the lashon is the razah the kurbana, the secret of the carbon, the mystery of the carbon. Eila ad razah de einseif goes up. Reich necheach. Eila elevates to razah to the mysteries or the deeper dimensions of Ein Sof. The carbon lashon kiruv. Carbon comes from the word kiruv, coming closer to. That's the closeness of the faculties and the names. B'chai uses that lashon kiruv hakeches v'hashemis, means that it's bringing closer the keches v'hashemis of the faculties and of the names of Hashem. That's what he says in B'chai. Kiruv hakeches v'hashemis.
To the world? Keches v'hashemis?
I believe they're talking about the keches al yenim, keches al yenim, shemes al yenim. And through this, it's transmitted. It draws down an abundance, an additional element of light, energy, and life force into the world. So, what does that mean? So pashtus would mean a pleasant scent that goes up to heaven, to the Eibishter. So he says, the shenim shech tesu zeir b'shem havaya. Well, what's the concept of a scent, of a smell? So here you have an object, you can do things with it, but the smell, when you smell something, it's a pleasant aroma, it elevates you. You sense a certain pleasure. What is it, beruchnis? That's a mashal. That there's an aliyah here. That there's a tesu seir in the name of Havaya. That's what the carbon does. And a tesu seir in all the worlds. This is all coming to explain, by the way, David's Midrash Hayelichukecha, what exactly was mistake of David? Why was he nanish? In other words, what he's coming to say is that David only was discussing Torah not in its pure form. He was telling Torah how it keeps the world going. That was the problem. He limited the Torah only to the sustenance of the worlds. That's what he's leading up to. So it's a big thing. Digdukal, so the digdukal of Torah. Not digdukal. Digdukachus of Torah. The whole thing is dependent on it. And the Rebbe Rashab is now building the case how the whole world is dependent. This is what David was saying, and we're going to say after all this, it was a limitation. that's going to end up saying it. So clearly, he's now taken Torah to a whole new other level. So I think I have to emphasize this, because I think right now he's not going to go back to David until 2 chapters from now, chapter 173. Just look at it. Just look at chapter 173. You'll understand where he's going to. First line. That's going to be the thing. So right now he's talking about. Yeah, and Masa and Bekasa. Yeah. It's based on the Gersa Kedesh starts in Kuntus Ach. David's Mitzvah Chukach as a Kuntus Ach Gersa Kedesh.
Why you forgot Tafkid?
Yeah. The bottom line is, interestingly, so I think what we're talking about here, maybe this may answer all the questions, because he's basically explaining that with Torah, everything we learn about Torah as Klal and Prat, Kiyum Elam, is going to end up being Chutzenis HaTorah. It's not even Primus HaTorah. So in other words, that's like the Prat of Torah, not the Klal. I guess that's where he's going to. So the whole thing with Ak, that's maybe where he's going to Primus Ak. Is that possible? I don't even remember it. We learned this, I taught this on this and that, and I still don't remember what I learned.
We'll get there.
Just a second. Okay, I must have a peek. I gotta see where this is going. Yeah, I guess, okay, celebrity Kafrelach. Yeah, oh boy. The good news is it's a separate sugi of Torah, so if this was going deeper into the sugi of Sagnuzis, I'd have a heart attack at this point.
But when you say Pneumius of Torah, you're not using it the same way we say the Chassidus and this. It doesn't mean the same thing.
He didn't get the Primus HaTorah yet. Now I remember it, yeah. By the way, he's going to ask the question, what's the difference between Chochmah Vak and Chochmah of Torah? Yeah.
We're not totally off the wall.
I didn't say we are. It's just a matter of Havana. But yeah. Now, see what the Rebbe Rashab is doing now. I should say this before we continue, because it's very relevant to really understand the next section. What he's doing now. It's very interesting how it's emerging here. Remember the first whole section of Ayin Beis that went from Shavuos Ayin Beis to Vayigash Ayin Gimel. That whole section was laying out the blueprint, right? Let's not use blueprint. That can be confusing. Laying out the structure, the map. Eres and Kalim, Eragvul, how everything, the structure, and how then slowly he moved to beyond structure, Bligvul, Ratzin, Eir and Shefa. Then he went to 3 meanings of Sfira. You all remember this?
Yeah, but the 3 meanings of Sfira was after.
No. It's all before.
After Vayigash? Wasn't after Vayigash?
No. 3 meanings of Sfira. Then back to 3 meanings in Keser. So he established basically the picture of the interface of going from Gvul to Bligvul, relative Bligvul to real Bligvul Amiti. Different ways that he explained it. In the second part, which we are really now, we're now in Veschanon, but Shavuos Ayin Gimel, he took it to another level. He started talking about what's the purpose of the Eira Bligvul. It was more an Aveda even now, almost like talking now, after he laid out the thing, now we're talking now how this applies. And he went to the whole discussion. Eira Bligvul creates bittul into the worlds. Eira Gvul creates the existence of the worlds. And then speaks the difference between Ovis and Matan Torah, the length, Shaddai. That was all the next section. That went into the whole indifference between the Yichud Chadash and Yichud, 2 types of Yichudim, Yisrael, Saba, Tfuna, that whole thing, with Meichen and Midas, which then concluded is back to the Ovis and Shaddai, and then now Ovis aligned the world to the Eira Gvul primarily, to the top of Eira Gvul, and then he went back to Eira Bligvul. This is the snapshot. Eira Bligvul. Then he starts speaking what Torah is. Now remember, Torah is an integral part of all this. We didn't hear a lot about Torah for the last 300 pages. I mean, we did here and there, Because if you really look at many ends of the Maimorim, he would talk about Torah like he spoke all the way in the beginning. There's a whole piece of Primus Torah. There's the Torah is the Mamutza. Just for the record, I actually taken there to these chapters here. If you look at page Yudalit, you'll be shocked that we actually learned what we're learning now there. Page Yudalit, look at the top, look, second line of page Yudalit, 14. Bin Yedua. Yeah. Okay.
Because first he said that the Ak is nice, saying the Torah he gamkin mamutza. It's also the Torah that's a mamutza, not only.
Yeah. And there we look at the end of the paragraph. Hamutza kolom beis madregas primis atera v'chetzenis atera. So he already bavorened it, but he didn't really explain it, and now he's going back to explain that page Yudalad.
Right, because he's grappling. There's two mamutzas. There's the Ak that's a mamutza.
Exactly. So now here's the point. So Torah is supposed to be bringing in Eir HaBligvul. But right now we're just learning that Torah is bringing in Eir HaGvul. Klal and Prat is Eir Gvul. It's coming to a Prat. So that's why the Rebbe Rashabur is doing now is a long discussion how Torah takes it. Torah is going to be the key to bringing us from Eir HaGvul to Eir HaBligvul. That's the bottom line. That was clear. That's the whole Shavuos starts with that. Ayin Gimel. So we keep wondering, how do you jump to the Bligvul? How do you jump into the infinite possibilities of the artist? So till now we were discussing it more in a way, because you know that the infinite possibilities of Shir Atzmei B'Keach. He envisioned this possibility. So really, this is it. Okay, I just got the punchline. Really, Gvul of existence is just a manifestation of Bligvul. But in our existence, it's a real Gvul. There's no question. We live in a limited world. We're mortals. So how do mortals get back to understand Gvul? Gvul. The answer is going to be because Torah is a manifestation, Elam Hazeh, of Elikus and Gvul. The Medida of mitzvahs is not a Medida Atzmis. It's not a Medida, rather. It's not a real limitation. It's the way God chooses to be Bein Shnei Badei Adam. So without Torah, what you're going to have is, in other words, if you have only Ak in the world, you're going to have is either Gvul or Bligvul. So true, Ak has the snapshot, is the picture, but the real jump to make that we should be able to elevate a Gvul to Bligvul, you're going to have to do a mitzvah with it. It's not going to just be with Haskalah, and understanding that Gvul comes from Bligvul. That's where he's leading to. You understand? So till now we didn't have this yet. He didn't address this yet. But if you remember the beginning of this whole sugi, if you remember, he started, what did he say after Kanei Hamida? He asked the question, everything comes through Kav Hamida. So how could you say the Ovis and definitely Matan Torah brings something higher from Kav Hamida? From the measuring line? So he answered what? That there's Kanei Hamida. There's the Chesed and Gvura, there's something higher. And then he said that Torah is a Medida Atzmis. This one chapter, I've sensed it at the time, but now I'm sure, is a crucial chapter in the connection of it. The chapter about Medida Atzmis of the Torah. It's actually a chapter that's easy to almost like dismiss or ignore because it doesn't seem like it's so... It seems like, separate. This chapter, which one is it? But Torah is a Medida. The Torah... Right, where's that chapter? Oh, here we go. Chapter Kuf Nun Tes. That chapter. Yeah. So he speaks, remember, Tagberes Achayes, that when something comes from great intensity, it comes in a very diminished form. Not because of limit, but because of strength. Gedenkst? That's it. So there, Torah becomes, therefore, the Medida of Torah is the bridge between Medida of Welt and the Bligvul of Elikus.
And Ak is the bridge between that.
Ak is the bridge between, you could say, between the Medida of Welt to the big picture of the Welt. So it's also a Mutza. But Torah is what really finishes the job. Ak is also a step in the process. Trust me, Ak is also a step. Yeah, very good. This is critical, what I just said now.
You go higher and higher, you get that Tzilas, you go to Ak, and then you jump to Torah, or is it at the same time?
No, we have a Torah down here on earth. It's all down here. It's all playing itself out on this earth.
Torah. It's all the steps to making it through Torah.
And then, yes, through Torah mitzvahs is ultimately the steps, for sure. But there's like two tracks going on one track. That's why I said before, there could have been two tracks. The Torah track, the world track. God made it in a very fascinating that the world itself is coming through the Torah track. However, what emerges in the world is we have a stone. And Torah takes a stone and makes a stone connected to Bligvul. Let's put it bluntly that way. That's the bottom line. You do have to have an existence, but the existence, in other words, Eir is Yesh. The Yesh of the world is also created through Eir. But a Yesh is a Yesh, and Eir is Eir. Torah is Eir. That's the key. The worlds are Yesh, even Ak. Even in the world of Yesh, you also have a picture, a klal. And Torah is the one that makes the ultimate connections and links. Listen, this has to be obviously spelled out in detail. But that's the gist of it. You basically say Ak is Kalim, but Ak is Kalim that sees all the Kalim as one big picture. Torah is Eir. And just like Eir connects us to Eir Ein Sof, because it's Me'ein HaMoed, that's what Torah does. But the interesting is the Keli comes through the Eir and is sustained through the Eir and so on. That's how it is. Yeah. That's what it is. So now we're talking about Torah as Torah Eir.
So the pleasure.
And that's why Chochmah. Here we go. You're going to like this. And that's why Chochmah and Chochmah Stamah play such an important role, because that's Torah. It's the wisdom of God. It's Eir.
Right.
But it's Eir that's coming into Kalim. Because remember, wisdom is just the edge of the Eir, and just a drop of a Keli. You have just a point. And that connects to the unconscious. You understand what's going on there? So Chochmah becomes the bridge, essentially Chochmah of Torah. It's very powerful.
That's why David HaMelech has a heritage which is more connected with Kalim.
And he was punished because he was focusing on the Torah as it applies to.
But Ak also has B'chinas Ein Sof Shel Hamaylim B'Geder Shaychus. Doesn't Ak also have B'chinas Ein Sof Shel Hamaylim B'Geder Shaychus Halaylim?
Pnim Yisak, yeah. That's what he said before. Pnim Yisak.
Right, so it's a mamutza between the Ein Sof and
exactly right.
Right, and the Torah. It's also mamutza. It's a.
And if you heard anything I just said, Ak is primarily Kalim. It's primarily existence. Yeah, that doesn't mean. But remember, in existence there is the Eir too. Even in a plain stone, there's Eir HaBligvul. But you can't do anything with it because you don't have a Torah to tell you how to do it. No, you can't take a stone and turn it into Bligvul unless you destroy it. The Torah says, take a stone, remagdish it, and build a base of Mikdash from it, and your stone becomes a Keli for Bligvul. So yes, Ak, and that works very well, because it's not destroying the stone. You know why? Because the stone is also in the image of the klal of Ak, and Pnim Yisak connects to Eir Ein Sof too. But the Torah is the one that does the revelation of it, you could basically say. So it all stems. You want also the Elamis, you want bridges and interfaces. In other words, Torah is not the only interface. The worlds are interfaces too, but their switches don't come alive without the Torah. That's how you would put it. It would be like saying all the Kalim are evolved from one another. Bria evolves from Atzilus, Yitzhak from this. But Torah is what turns the switch on. So the Rebbe what said about a Rebbe is that you all have the wick.
Turns on the flow.
It turns on the electricity essentially. But obviously the connection is going to be through the worlds. The worlds are not going to be destroyed through this, because the worlds themselves have this process within them built in. Shir Atzmei B'Koyach. Torah is the track that basically ignites it all. But what is it igniting? Imagine you have a machine, and the machine has to have the interfaces built in. Then comes electricity and runs through it. Now it comes alive, and the machine is working. If the machine didn't have the interface, if there was no Ak and there was not the whole thing in the Shtalshlus, Torah would just destroy the world. It would come in, shine light, and the whole thing would fall apart. And you'd have dominance of Eir Ein Sof, but you wouldn't have a world. So you must have a structure of a world, and you have to have in the structure built in these interfaces. That's why I keep saying that explains the whole idea. Welt is Atzilus is a mamutza, Ak is a mamutza, and Torah is also a mamutza. He doesn't mean also another. He means it's a parallel track to those interfaces and brings them alive.
That's why
it would be like saying, it would be something like this. We're sitting here in this room. Each of us have our own opinion, right? We have different people. In Day saying Shabbos, we have different positions on things. We have the possibility to work together and collaborate, and each one brings their own strengths. But who's going to ignite that possibility? You need something to do that. Because if not, we're going to be left to our own opinions. Comes a force, we'll call that Torah, that says, listen, here's a way you can all work together. So the interfaces are in there, but you need something to bring it alive and to make it happen. That's how I would explain it, in one way to explain it.
That's why now I'm calling to light a menorah, because everybody has Torah.
I just wanted to tie it all together. Now that's a very key thing. Wow. Ooh.
Did you know that?
Man, alive. So let's just read a little more and we'll stop it, because this is going to go. We're going into details, all to explain the dikduk. So all this is explaining now how a little detail of the world, how the world is dependent on Torah. So you bring Korbanos as an example, Reich Necheach, and so on. So then he continues. So Reich Necheach. So we're adding through a mitzvah. Basically, Torah sustains the world and also adds new energy into the world. Okay, that's why this is so vital, because it adds new energy into the world. It's almost like what the Ovis did, and then it's going to add something beyond. And what David was us, he only focused on what it did to the world. He didn't focus what's beyond the world. So he gets punished because he forgot about the Eir HaBligvul. Verstehst? The Ovis.
He enjoyed himself.
The Ovis, that's what the Ovis. If David was the Ovis, it'd be fine, because that's what their Aveda is. But David is after Matan Torah. Verstehst du? Was geht davor? Aber warum? If David was the Ovis, he'd be mit dem Welt Mashaber given. But now you're after Matan Torah. What do you mean you're forgetting Bligvul?
Right. So we should
God Almighty. God, this one above has standards that are beyond. You can't get away with anything. You can dedicate your whole life in being Mamshech Halakus and Veld, but if it's not Bligvul, not good enough. What do we have to say for ourselves? We haven't even begun with the Gvul. Okay, well, very nice. The Korban Lashon Kira, fine. So he says this. And this is what it means. In the time of the Beis Hamikdash, there was a revelation of the divine, of godliness, like the 10 miracles that were in the Beis Hamikdash. Like the Pirkei Avos, he spells them out. So it means there was a divine revelation. Just as you came to be seen, you also came to see. So it wasn't just God to see us. You come to Aliyah L'Regel, the pilgrimages to see the divine. To be seen by the divine. And God should see you're there. It's also for you to see. Ubafrad b'Kodesh HaKadoshim, and specifically the Holy of Holies, Shahya Meir, Gilead Insof Mamish. There radiated Mamish in itself. The Makam Ha'adon Eina Min Hamid. Literally time, the space, and beyond space. This may connect to what we've learned. Okay. So the Makam Ha'adon, as we know, Eina Min Hamid. It was a Makam Ha'adon. The Adon occupied space. It had measurements. Same time, it had no measurements. That if you measured the Adon, it was a measurement. If you measure from wall to wall, it's as if the Adon wasn't there.
If you measure from the end of the Adon to the wall and from the end of the Adon to the other wall, then it's as if the Adon wasn't there.
Yeah. How to imagine that, I'm not sure, but that's what it says. Yeah, it was like there or not there. It was like those flash, those images that come by light. It's like, what do they call it? Projections. See, if you think it's there, it's not there. But here, it happened to be there, and also not there. Okay, so it was a manifestation of Elokus Mamish. That's what it says. Remember, the emphasis is Mamish. Before he said Gili Elokus, now Mamish. It's found out in Ayin Beis many times. There's Ein Seif Mamish and Ein Seif, which is not Mamish. Calls you idea Karbonis. So this is according to the Shittas HaRambam. Heißt es? Because the Ramban sagt the Iker Chayfetz the Mishkan was the Aron. The Rambam says the main thing is Karbonis. Here the Rebbe Rashab is saying Kol Zeh, meaning even the Aron. This whole Gili Elokus is through Karbonis. Interessant, huh?
Yeah.
He's like bringing both together. All this is through Karbonis. That means when we bring a Karban, Lashon Kiruv, we elevate everything to the highest levels, and we bring a tasteless eris, we bring a revelation down below. You know what I see here is also like they could also say almost like an explanation why the Rambam. See, according to the Ramban, the ikar thing of the Mishkan is a metzias, is a odin. According to the Rambam, the ikar is an aveda, because karbonos is an aveda. It's not that ikar is the mizbeach, ikar is the avedas are karbonos. According to the Ramban, it's the metzias that odin was the highest place, and that was the purpose to have a lakuz down below. According to the Rambam, it's the avedas are karbonos, which is the purpose of the Beis Hamikdash, and it's an Aveda. And what he wants to emphasize here is that through an Aveda of a Digduk Kal, by being Mekayim Teira, that's how you change it. And not just that there's a Kedesh Kedoshim down below. Why is there a Lakuz down below? Because it comes through Aveda. That's why he's emphasizing. Because I was just wondering, why is he? Because he wants to emphasize Aveda. That's what he's emphasizing. And all this is specifically only when the offering is done appropriately. Ketikune means exactly as specified. Properly.
Is that like davening nowadays?
Yeah. Aval im yesh be'eze psul, hari b'teila kol ha'alav amshacha. Or botla, b'teila. If there's any psul, if the carbon has any blemish, any, anything disqualifies it. Defect. Yeah, defect. So the whole halah, b'teila kol ha'alav amshacha. This whole halah, this whole elevation and drawing down is bottle. So he's bringing all how digdukal, how a small specific detail in our action affects the whole picture. The same thing with mitzvahs tefillin. Because through this draws down the mechin and mind into zah, into midas. The dalad batim and dalad mechin kuned. The dalad batim is referring to the shalosh. Before, what do we call them? The housages, the four housings. Right, the four boxes correspond to the Dalad Mechin. Dalad Mechin is Chacham Bina, and Das divides into two. Kaned, as is known. Zah, these are the midas, the supernal emotions that have relationship with the world, as we learn. And Meichin,
no,
I'm sorry, I skipped a line. Meichin and Gilatmi, like we learned earlier, that Meichin is when you intelligence is to yourself. Others actually disturb you, confuse you. Midas is relating to others. And the relation to yourself. And how you express yourself to others, expression to yourself, expression to others are very distant from one another. So here we see again, like with the karbonos, what's mitzvah's tefillin? When you're nimshach meichel nizah, azay, you would be your mind. You live in your own world, your own intelligence. Your emotions relate to others. So there's you, the introvert, the extrovert, so to speak, inward, outward. When you bring the tefillin, which is dalad batim, which is dalad meichin, and you put it on shal, that's the shal rosh, and you bind shibud halev ameach, that's the whole point. And you put on the shal yad that corresponds to the heart. You're binding mind and heart. You're bringing meichin, which would go to itself, inward. You bring it outward. So what are you doing? You bring mamshich. What is it? Lamaila. Meichin lamaila is alakus to itself. Midas lamaila is the midas alyenis is amshach lamata. So you're connecting, you're interfacing basically something that goes beyond, that goes higher into bringing it down. Amshach the be'elamis. That's taste for is be'elamis.
It's almost 11 o'clock.
But this is specifically when tefillin are proper. It's not just that tefillin have to have. There's a dinim how makes a tefillin kosher. What makes a tefillin? Al pi hateira, that they're made properly according to the teira. Baklaf in the parchment that the pashas are written on inside the boxes. Vidiyai and the ink, ubaksiva, and how it's written, ubasiyas, and how it's crafted. So tefillin, all these things are relevant, all four. The parchment, the ink, the writing, and the crafting of the actual tefillin. If you don't do it properly, it's not kitikunam, and they don't do all these amshachas. Mashenk yeshesh be'mei psul. However, when it has some type of defect, halachically, in other words, hari batel kol hamshacha. The entire transmission is batel. So we see our little detail. This is the prat, by the way, not the klal of ak. This is the prat. How a detail affects the entire existence, which the entire existence was built on the condition that we will keep the Torah. And the same is with all the mitzvahs. Rather, through them is drawn down abundance, additional energy and life force into the world. And specifically when they're done the proper way, exactly. And that's what. And this was David he was how to say misameach nafshe. But he consoled himself, like more than consoled. He celebrated with himself. It was a way of like consoling himself in the time of his tsar, in the time of his problem, pain, and
kept his spirits
and depression. Shahaya loitev, Shahaya. I'm sorry, but when it was not good. Begashmis, when it was not good for him in physical, so what was he misameach himself? That because all the worlds are teluyim, are dependent on one digduk of one Torah, of one specific detail in Torah, yeah. So all the tzoros of this world are not teifas makom. They have no significance compared to Torah, because even one detailed Torah, it's all dependent on that. And that's why also by him, by David that is, all these things, all these pains and all these tzaras that he had, problems, had no significance, no meaning at all. Through the Eira Teira that radiated, illuminated in his soul, not only didn't it bother him, he was in great joy, great celebration from the Eira of Teira. And Yalkut on the pasuk in Shir Hashirim, that came the time of Hazamir, the time of is that not autumn? It's a season, I think, right?
I think cutting the
cutting. So now Chag Osif, at that time of Osif, I think, right?
No,
Zamir also from the Lashon
Zmira?
Zmira, yeah. The bird is called Zamir,
Yeah, but at the time of chirping, it's spring. I think it's not autumn, spring. But I think but that's why it's called that.
Cutting the wheat.
What?
Zamir.
The harvest.
Cutting the harvest, yeah.
Zamir
Aritzim.
One later. There's two.
I think it's the time of spring.
Chirping of the.
Well, Chag Osif is the time of.
It says over here,
So it is autumn. It is autumn. Then it's Sukkot's time.
Gathering
Right. I'm sorry. It's Shavuos time.
Somehow it's my head.
So the summer, the beginning of summer. Yeah. Eisa Zami said, what does it say in Medrash? Let's see in Yalkut. Isa b'Shem Mechilta. It says there in the name of the Mechilta, Higia Zmana shel Orla leZamir. The time has come. No, Orla is what? Orla is the first 3 years.
Das meinst du? First years, Orla mitzad. Okay.
Well, I guess it says several things. Higia Zmana shel Orla leZamir. What does that mean?
to cut the Orla, and he gives Bancha Tassel is Mirror.
Orla means the first the first 3 years of the growth. Igiyas Masha Tassel is Zmira, Shenemar Azi v'Zimras Yaka. Time that came that you should do for me, Taseli, you should make me a song. You should, I guess, compose for me a melody. Mm-hmm. Like it says, Azi v'Zimras Ka. Azi. Mm-hmm. How we touch Azi? It's the strength v'Zimras Ka, and sing this song of God. Azi, in other words, Azi,
my strength.
Yeah. But it means Azi v'Zimras Ka, yeah.
High level when you have these punishment. Wow.
He gives mana shel Teira li nosen. Basically, the pasuk is saying a bunch of drashas on the one pasuk that it came the time of Orla the cut, the Zamir is to cut, right? Is to the Zamir to cut. He came the time to sing, And it came the time for the Torah to be given. The Ksiv Zmiris Hayli Chukecha. The Torah is called Zmiris, so this is all this. Uchenu b'Medrash Rabbah Shir Hashirim HaPosuk Hanal. Same thing is also Medrash Rabbah and Shir Hashirim on this pasuk. V'im Kain, according to this, Yashlem is Zmiris. Shlem that Zmiris is Meloshen Lezamer Aritzim. To cut the weeds, to cut the offshoots. Aritzim is, yeah. Right, but in other words, the Nishgevunshne. Aritzim is literally weeds or offshoots.
We say it in Halal, Zamer Aritzim, but it's also...
It's to tear out the weeds.
Against us, yeah.
Yeah. So basically, we could say Zmiris from Noshel Zamer Aritzim, Kamoi Higi Zman HaShalorla. That's what Zman HaShalorla means. The time to, in other words, to cut out. To cut. V'hainu sh'aydei Zmiris be'esek ha'teira dezeh zemer ha'aritzim o machris ha'klipos ha'mastirim. Which means, through the Zmiris, the songs, in the study of Torah, through this we cut out the weeds, and you cut down machris, and you sever the source of energy for the klippos that are the klippa that conceals, that are concealing. Val derech reimus kel begreinom. By dezeh v'cheref pifias.
Right, by singing praises to Hashem.
Right, reimus kel, through singing praises begreinom in your throats. V'cheref pifias is like a sword.
Double-edged sword.
A double-edged sword that cuts, in other words, the klippos. So what is this all relevant here? So this is how he had simcha from Torah. Let's see where he goes here. There needs to be a sword of two edges.
Together goes before one.
Yeah. But Inyan who the Inyan is the Nidei the Yunikas Achatzenim Yochalis Al Bezei Fanim. The Inyan of this is that it's known that Yunikas Achatzenim, which means the weaning, the gleaning, we call the nursing of the Chetzenim. It's an expression that when, for example, bacteria and all kinds of, what do?
Fester.
They're like parasites, like a mosquito that just takes a little sip. So when you have a lot of energy, Chetzenim come, the parasites that come to get their little tidbits. So Yunika means basically it's a narrow flow. So it could be in two ways. Or the klippos lift themselves up to go up to the Makaf Elyon, or Commercial Kosev, Im Tagbi Kenesher. What does that mean? So where do they go? They go to a place, to a high level. Like for example, if you want to, you'll see sometimes when people want something, they'll go to the king because everybody's equal by him. So he's going to give everybody. He's going to give the good and the bad, and so the Chetzenim, right? Yeah. So they go up to the Makif Elyon, like it says, Im Tagbi Kenesher. If you lift yourself up like an eagle.
It's talking about.
And what's an eagle? Derech HaNesher b'Shamayim. What does that mean? An eagle is in heaven. It's a high level. Why do they go there? Because the Chetzenis Hamakif. It's like the sun. The sun shines on everything. So everyone gets from it. The good forces, the negative forces. Everything, darkness is like light. So everybody can receive. So that's in Tagbiyah Kaneshet. You lift yourself up, the Klippa have like a chutzpah, and they just get online with everybody else. Oisha Mekablim, the second way is the opposite. They Mekabel not by going up, by going down. Meribu it's not tzimtzum. And there's a tremendous tzimtzum. Like where do parasites gather? Where do they go where it's dark? Right. They go where there's very little energy, where there's very little light. Where there's an intense, a very increasingly intense concealment. So there too they can receive because it's so dark. So the first way is they go where it's very light, but everybody's equal there. The other way is they go where it's very dark and nobody can tell the difference.
If it's a regular Gilead,
the Mechinas Gilead Kabul. From when things are revealed, everything is clarity, they cannot receive. The Ani V'hu, a Balgaiva, cannot rest under the same canopy. We can't dwell on the same canopy.
It can't be the same.
Right, when it's revealed. Another aspect. It's also known that when there's Gilead, you need to have Kelim Eleir. And Klippa is not a Kelim. But that's why they're not capable of receiving. They're not Kelim. Klippa is Yesh. It's not interested in receiving. So when there's a Gilead, number one, they cannot receive, because anivahu. God says, I and an arrogant person can't be under the same canopy.
Before he said they could, that's because it's Ariba. It's different.
He's going to maybe he'll spell it out. If not, I'll explain it. And second thing is they're not kalim, so they're not kalim. So with this gilu, you need a keli. When there's a hell, rag meribu had simsim. However, only when there's an intense simsim, she'en sham gile'eh, when there's no revelation, they can receive for these two reasons. V'gam yechelim mebchinas makav elyon, v'gam yechelim mebchinas makav elyon yechelim lekabel. He's going back to the Erste Zach. He's bavorning, I think, what you're saying. The lashon is a bit redundant. V'gam yechelim mebchinas makav elyon.
This is a third.
Yechelim lekabel. No, it's not a third. No. And also they can receive from the makav elyon. They can receive. They're able to receive. Why does he say twice yechelim? Gam yechelim. Okay, fine. Teichel is clear. And that also is not from Gili HaMakif. So now in general, the Makif in general is a state of Helam. So in other words, it's just a different type of Helam. Here the Helam is no air at all. There, it's a Helam of indifference, basically. Yeah, that's the... Yeah. You can see Ganovim, sometimes they dress up, masquerade in a king's ball. They dress up, and they're there. They have it on Gamvadan. Because this party is so big.
There's chasana.
Yeah.
There's a lot of Ganovim.
Yeah. And then there's
the book. It's been delivered.
It's documented in all the papers, in all the newspapers.
It's unbelievable.
What?
I
can't. Drinking Ira Fachet.
Wer die Gamme?
At that time, there were Ganovim everywhere. You walk in the street, they took from your pockets, they took...
That was called the Ksuva also.
At that time, they took everything.
What?
Everybody came, they started coming with Angehim Schleppen Sachen.
Where did they schlep?
They schlepped from everything, from everywhere.
In Begoli?
No, chapar here, chapar there, pickpocketers...
professional Ganon.
1 second, no. The Rebbe is Nesias, it's a Changahim. In other words, that's the Talmud Ganovim. Klippas are stealing Kedusha. I can build a whole drush on this. I got to think it through. That's why you need a sword of two edges to cut down both possibilities. Yeah. To cut down the unique from Beis. This is gewaldig. You got to be thorough. You got to cut them from this end and from that end, or else they're going to krich. That's Menedik, no? That's good. I like that. This is a model of how to protect our youth. As piri of memal, as piri memal, v'shrosh of metachas. Ashmid, which means to destroy. I guess it destroyed the weed or whatever disturbs the fruit from above and its roots from below. So you need from Beit Zaytin. That's very nice. Memal is this. The Ashmid is Piri Memal. Hushalo Yikab Ma'makav Elyon. To eliminate it from above the fruit. In other words, it's probably like you have insects, that probably come and eat from the top of the fruit, and then they come to eat from the bottom of the roots. So you have to get rid of both of them. So mal, they shouldn't receive from the makafelia. Veshrosh of metachas, and from the attack on the roots below. So that they should not glean from the intense tzimtzum. V'kol zeh nasa yedei neshamas Yisrael. Okay, should we stop here? Okay, so basically we summed up here that he's explaining David HaMelech's simcha, that he came to console himself through focusing on the power of one piece of mitzvah, one detail in Torah. The whole world is dependent on it. And now, it's midas l'chukach, and now he's going into explaining what his midas are based on the Medrash. So what do we establish? That zemer aritzim, that midas comes from cutting. So again, this also is going to be a David Tafel. That David was cutting, was focusing more on destroying the forces, the negative forces. Basically, the negative forces through Torah, as opposed to the Torah of Ligvul. That's what he's leading to, it looks like. Okay, let's stop here. We did half of chapter 171, page 346 and 347.
Moish.